So today I want to try to speak on something that potentially I don't fully grasp, and I'm going to explore the conversation as it happens. But I want to talk about the idea of how we fit into a linear timeline, how we live in a time-oriented reality, and how we are simultaneously what we were, what we are, and what we can be. It's kind of a tricky conversation to traverse, and again, I'm not an expert in this, but I think it's something worth thinking about and potentially engaging. And so I'm titling this episode Being and Becoming. And the idea is that we, by nature, are chained to a reality that is time oriented. We live in a day, week, month, year, and lifetime cycle. We are directly correlated with a time frame that is measurable. And our role within this is interesting because we are a being that is traversing a timeline that we are simultaneously what we were, what we are, and what we can be. Now, how do you engage this? I think there's a few different aspects. I think that you can engage time in a matter that is almost like a dance or playing with time. And what that means is that you don't let it hold you down, you don't let it stress you out. And I have fallen victim to that where I feel as though it has always been on my mind that time is short, that life is fast, that time is fleeting. It is the strange paradox, per se. It's a strange dynamic that time is both priceless, it is free, and it is something that, regardless of how we utilize it or how we engage it, how we use our time, it is going to happen regardless of if we think about it and we are proactively disciplined in how we use our time, or it'll pass over us and we will waste time and be lost in the timeline of history. Now, I think a lot of people struggle with the idea of who they are in the present. And I think that the two pitfalls, the two dangers of who you are can be hindered by being stuck in the torment, the hauntings, being stuck um, being stuck in the things of the past. I think the mistakes that you have made, I think the different things that you regret from the past can eat away at you in a way that not only can it be consuming your past and how you viewed the world previously, but it can also make you depressed. It can steal your time in the current. And I think you can also have another pitfall of losing the present by being stressed about the future of the world, the future of your life, the future of finances, the future of responsibility, the unknown of the future, the potential of the future, the utter freedom and the utter chaos of the future can also hinder your present. Now, in Christianity, this also plays out in the biblical narrative and also in biblical truths of that you are inherently who you are in the present, who you were of the past, and who you can be. And what that means biblically is if you are redeemed, if you are justified, if you are saved, those are technically in all three of those categories. It can be a past situation that you accepted Christ in the past, but you also hold the title of redeemed. You also hold the title of child of God in the present, and you can also hold that in the future. But how Christianity plays out is that the idea of what you can be, the virtues, the truths, the standards, and the moral obligations that are within the scriptures hold you to a standard that is labeled sanctification. And the idea is that you are not only who you are now, but you can be more than you are presently. Now, the tricky part with all of this is when past, present, and future get messy. They start to tangle up on themselves. And I'm going to reference some of Jordan Peterson's teachings in this and some people that he studied to explain some of these ideas. Number one, I want to talk about Carl Jung, who is someone that Jordan Peterson looks up to. but I personally haven't studied that much. There's just a idea that Jordan Peterson outlined that I think pertains to this topic. Carl Jung talked about the phenomenon that he described as retrogressive restoration of the persona. It's a complicated idea, but basically what it means is that sometimes you take a leap forward and you learn some new things, but you can't catalyze a new identity, and so you try to go back and hide in your old identity. But that actually doesn't work because things have changed and you've learned something, and that isn't who you are anymore. And so basically, what that means is, say you become a believer in the faith, you accept Christ and all these truths that are inherent to who you are, blots out the past, and it holds you to a higher chord moving forward. But what can happen, even in your faith, we sin and we fall and we make mistakes. And when we make mistakes, when we are under stress, we return to our familiar comfort. We try to run to the past of what we knew. But the issue is, you are no longer unredeemed. You now have a new title of being a Christian, of being a believer, and that's your present. You're held to a higher standard in the future, and you're trying to run to the past, and your identity is confused in a timeline that makes it tricky to traverse. Peterson also talks about Jung having the idea of circumambulation, which is a big word, but basically the idea is that Jung talked about the idea of your identity circling itself over time. And so if you make the same mistakes, if you have an inherent destiny or an identity, you circle your true self time and time again until you become truer self, if that makes sense. Jordan Peterson also refers to Rogers with the idea of congruence. And basically, the idea with that is, in order to engage a healing conversation, you had to be congruent, both body, emotion, motivation, rationality, utterances, all these different things. And basically, what this means is to be integrated as a person is how you integrate in a timeline as well. It's also interesting perspective as far as timeline, even in relationships. I've heard it said, and I don't know who said it, but there is a dynamic of a child to parent, say son to father, daughter to mother, any which direction you want to cut it. And basically, the idea between the child and the parent is that as the child grows up, it sees the parents in different roles or different ways, different personas, I guess you could say. And so when the child is young, the idea is that we tend to idolize our parents. And so if a son looks up to a father in his uh, infancy, the son sees the father as Superman. The son sees the father as strong, as taking on the world with courage. The son sees the father as all these things that might not technically be true. We idolize, we see in a sentiment of heroism, we think that from the child to the parent, it is more a admiration effect. And when the child progresses through infancy and into teenage, youth, young adult, the tendency is to err in rebellion as understanding is gained by the child, and as they enter into teenage years and early adulthood, they tend to rebel. They tend to go against their parents. They tend to demonize the parents. It goes from idolizing to demonize. Now, in this stage, the idea is that the children fight back, they question, they think that they know more than their parents. They tend to be cynical, they tend to want to be independent, and it's the natural progression of maturation, of growing up, but it tends to have a effect of shifting gears, going from the child seeing the parents in admiration to the child seeing that the parents maybe aren't all that they thought they were. And what happens from my experience and from me seeing the world is that as the child then progresses past the teenage years into early adulthood and starts to be independent in the world and starts to engage the world at a certain point, whether it be when they get married and have their own family or just start to bear the burden of the responsibilities of the world, as they start to become an adult, as they start to grow up truly, it then goes to the next stage, and that is it goes from idolize to demonize. And the last stage is the child sees the parent in a way that they humanize the parents. They see that their parents aren't Superman. They see that their parents aren't terrible. They see their parents as both. They see that their parents just tried to do the best that they could. They see that they are human just like them, that they make mistakes, that they try their best, but they are just human. And so I think this is also an interesting conversation as far as the progression developmentally with relationships as well. All of this is linked with time and how we deal with the past, present, and future, how we see relationships. And I think all of this is important. Now, the question to end this conversation is, how should we engage time? I think that I have struggled with this a lot growing up. I think that I have felt as though I am always behind with time, that time moves too fast, and that I am floundering as time moves quicker than I can grab it. But I think the best way to engage time is to try to be as present as possible in the present, to be better than your past, to remember the mistakes that you made, but to not let that be an anchor point and not to drag you down, and in so doing, lose the present by focusing on the past. I also think that by being the most present at the present time means to not stress about the future, to not focus on what could be, to not let your happiness in the present be stolen by the fears of tomorrow. I think that we need to have a real awareness for gratitude, for living in the present, to open our eyes, to see what is around us, to engage, to try to do our best in the present, because there is no guarantee. There is no guarantee for tomorrow. We need to try to do our best that we can today and to not let the past or the future hinder us, to be in the present. And hopefully that makes things better.